Corita's art education really began when she was in parochial school here in Los Angeles, and she described that as being primarily taking pictures out of a drawer and then copying them. And the first year maybe it was copy it with pencil, the next year maybe you got to do charcoal. But there was never anything terribly original about what they were being encouraged to do. When she entered the convent, between high school and college, she started getting formal art classes. Without having entered the convent, her education probably would have ended at high school because her family wouldn't have been able to afford it. So not only would she not have become an educated woman, she would never have become an artist had she not also been a nun. She went to classes at Chenard, Woodbury College, and then she had gone off to teach in British Columbia and was doing elementary level education, and then got brought back to Los Angeles when the college needed a second full-time art teacher. So they brought Corita back because she was the artsy one, and she did her master's in art history because that was much more of an academic subject than studio art at USC. And her studio art class was silkscreen printing. When she started producing prints in the 50s, they were religious. She wanted to do things that were part of her calling, but were not in the same vein as the very, I've heard people refer to it as the bearded lady Jesus or the shampoo girl commercial Jesus. And she had done a thesis on medieval sculpture. Her earliest works were very medieval looking, sort of this neo-Byzantine aesthetic. Lots of colors, lots of layers of colors, really reminiscent of stained glass windows. And that was through the early 50s. She was working on those. And then while artists and people who were, had entered the 20th century were very excited by a lot of her work, the church was really not. And they would get complaints about these weird and sinister images of the Holy Family, and she was asked to stop depicting the Holy Family or any people in this weird way. I think they did affect her, but she didn't let anyone know affect her, so she would sort of just, oh well, I'm off to the next thing. And she did. By then she was going to New York yearly, and in December she and her mentor, the head of the art department, would do lectures in New York City and galleries and visit museums, so they got to see everything that was going on, because she would say that things didn't come to LA till 10 years later. So she was seeing Motherwell and Gottlieb and Rothko, and she was taken with Ben Shahn, and you can see these things starting to appear in her works. In fact, in the very early works, she had become friends with Charles Eames, and the Eames chairs are in this print called At Cana of Galilee. So it was Jesus and Mary at this wedding party where they run out of wine, and the Eames chairs are the chairs that all the guests are their chairs for the guests, and they're these Eames chairs. So it's a really interesting juxtaposition of these very old historical stories and modern day. And I think so much of her life, or so much of her work, was really trying to merge the two and see where myths and religion and the fables and folk tales that we're supposed to be brought up with are still alive today. We just have to look in different places to find them. In the early 60s, I believe, Helen Kelly, who was then the president of the college, had gone to Harvard. I think she was taking a course at Radcliffe, and she'd heard Dan Berrigan speak. Helen Kelly invited Sister Williams, she was called then, invited Father Berrigan to come here. I think probably both Philip and Dan Berrigan came at that time. He led a retreat up at Montecito, where they have their Center for Spiritual Renewal now, and then it was the convent, mother house for the new initiates coming in. And Corita was just taken. Everybody was taken by him. And they would say that the administration was farther to the left than the faculty, who was farther to the left than the students. So it was really, they felt very strongly about imbuing their students with this sense of social responsibility, of understanding what was going on in the world and how we need to participate in that. Mm-hmm. And part of Corita's choice of doing screen printing rather than painting or something else is, I think, this idea that this is such a political, such a democratic art form, that it's not one person gets it and gets to hoard it. It's for everyone. The messages can be broadcast. They need to be shown. And she would tell people, and she would give them artwork, a lot of her sisters, Don't take it if you're not going to put it up. I don't want it just sitting under a bed. It needs to be up and shown. This is Motive magazine from 1966, and this was commissioned by the editor B.J. Stiles. This was at the time when Corita had really started to get into the big, bold, graphic pop art. She used the red, white, and blue in a lot of her work to bring in the patriotism of speaking out and of telling the truth. The boldness and the letters look like they're handwritten, they're in all caps. It's a very bold statement, and you can't miss the message. This was another commission done in 1971 for clergy and laity concerned. Daniel Ellsberg, with the Pentagon Papers, had exposed the lies that had really gotten us into the war in the first place. Wouldn't you go to jail if it would help end the war was something that he had said to a reporter outside the courthouse when he was on trial for, they called him a traitor for having told the American public the truth. After she left, actually in 1968, she left the Immaculate Heart community and moved to Boston. And her prints from that summer are the most overtly political that she ever did. They're not masked in this sort of bright colors and big words that you think are going to be something just playful and fun. And then when you get close, you realize, oh, there's an actual serious message in here. And it's almost as if, come in, the water's nice, and look at this that you really need to be doing. She was a teacher even through her art. I mean, she was a teacher in every sense of her work. But these ones that she did in 68, 69, that summer, were really difficult images to look at. Viet Cong being hunted, and then the poem by Walt Whitman, I Am the Hounded Slave, and pictures of slave boats and American soldiers, and just the real bleakness, although they're still done in these very bright colors. The work would take many different forms, and sometimes she would be commissioned to do something and she would do it, and then that would seem like, oh, that's going to be a great serigraph, so then it would turn into her own work. She did a whole series of these ads, for lack of a better word, for Westinghouse, which they had given her a list of quotes that she could choose from and just make a picture around the quote. So it was really going from her work. They wanted her work, her original work, and the quotes were all about expansion. They were all Anatole France and Walt Whitman and Disraeli, things that were about becoming better people, growing. Positive statements that, I guess it was more of a public service type campaign for Westinghouse. So those were ads, big page ads in Look magazine and different kinds of magazines. But then they became serigraphs, that she did a whole series of those prints it was a limited edition for the Westinghouse people. But that kind of thing was not uncommon, where it would start off in one incarnation and then it would become something else. She would say that what was going on with her in her mind, what she was concerned about, had to be in her art. There was no separating, this is my political thought and this is my artistic expression. It was one and the same thing. What she taught was what she did, was what she was thinking, was what she was surrounded by.